The glow of a screen flickers in the dark. It's midnight, yet your mind is still awake, scrolling, clicking, consuming. One video fades into another, one song bleeds into the next. You tell yourself you're bored, but deep down, it's not boredom that haunts you. It's the inability to be still. The world has grown louder than your own thoughts. Every silence feels suffocating, every pause feels like something's missing. But what if you're not bored at all? What if you're simply overfed on noise? Every second of your life has become filled with something. Podcasts on your commute, YouTube during meals, music when you shower, scrolling before sleep. The moment you stop, even for an instant, the silence creeps in, and you rush to drown it out. We live in an age where emptiness has become unbearable, where peace feels like a threat. You call it boredom, but it's closer to withdrawal. You're not starving for stimulation, you're sick from it. You've been fed so much noise that your soul has forgotten how to digest silence. Once, silence was natural. It wasn't something you needed to create, it existed around you, effortlessly. The spaces between things were alive with meaning. But now, silence feels like a void, something to be filled rather than experienced. The modern world has conditioned us to fear stillness. It whispers that if you're not constantly doing, watching, or listening, then you're falling behind. That if you're not entertained, you're missing out. But behind this endless craving lies exhaustion. Not the kind that sleep can cure, but the kind that comes from overstimulation. You can see it everywhere. People sitting together, yet each locked inside their own digital universe. Conversations replaced by scrolling. Walks replaced by podcasts. Thoughts replaced by content. We call it connection, but it's often just a synchronized escape. Everyone is running from something, not from boredom, but from the weight of their own mind. From the quiet confrontation that happens when there's no distraction left to hide behind. When the noise stops, the truth begins to surface. And that's what we fear the most. Because silence is not empty. Silence mirrors you back to yourself. It reveals the ache beneath your restlessness, the loneliness beneath your distractions, the questions you've avoided asking. The moment you stop consuming, you start feeling, and those feelings can be heavy. So we reach for noise again. Another song. Another scroll. Another voice to fill the void. But this constant feeding has a cost. Just as the body weakens from overindulgence, the mind loses its depth from overstimulation. You begin to crave novelty instead of meaning, stimulation instead of peace. The more noise you consume, the less capacity you have to listen, not just to others, but to yourself. You start mistaking motion for progress, busyness for purpose. You become full but not fulfilled. Saturated but starved. Think about how quickly you reach for your phone when you're waiting in line, or how restless you feel when you sit in silence for even a minute. That restlessness is not boredom. It's withdrawal, your mind craving another hit of noise, another distraction to avoid the discomfort of being present. Blaise Pascal once wrote, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." Centuries later, those words have never felt more accurate. We've surrounded ourselves with endless sound, yet we've never felt more hollow. We live under the illusion that noise keeps us connected, informed, alive. But often, it does the opposite. It keeps us disconnected from the only thing that truly matters, our own inner world. The world inside us has become neglected terrain. We scroll through lives, opinions, and ideas, but we rarely scroll inward. We know what everyone else thinks, but we barely know what we feel. There's a kind of spiritual malnutrition that comes from never being alone with your thoughts. Because solitude is not loneliness, it's intimacy with yourself. It's where clarity is born. But clarity requires stillness, and stillness requires silence. When was the last time you let yourself sit quietly without music, without a screen, without something to fill the space? We keep searching for something out there to fix the boredom, yet the cure has always been within. Boredom isn't the absence of stimulation, it's the absence of connection. Not with others, but with yourself. The truth is, the noise you consume every day doesn't bring you closer to life, it only numbs you from it. The modern disease is not emptiness, it's excess. It's the constant flood of sounds, images, and opinions that leave no room for silence to breathe. It's why even beauty feels dull, why time feels fast, why peace feels foreign. The world is shouting, but your soul is whispering. And the more you feed on noise, the fainter that whisper becomes. Maybe you were never truly bored. Maybe you've just forgotten what stillness feels like. Maybe the silence you've been avoiding isn't your enemy, it's your teacher. The one that's been waiting patiently, beneath all the noise, to remind you of something you used to know, that life's deepest truths are not heard in the noise, but in the quiet that follows. And so the question isn't whether you're bored, it's whether you're willing to listen again. We often think that information is nourishment, that every new idea, every piece of content, makes us wiser, more aware, more alive. But the truth is, we are living in an age of psychological overconsumption. The mind, like the body, can only digest so much before it begins to rot from excess. You can see it everywhere. People endlessly consuming without truly experiencing, scrolling without absorbing, knowing everything yet understanding nothing. We gorge ourselves on thoughts, images, sounds, and opinions until our minds become bloated with noise, unable to distinguish what's real from what's mere residue. You're not bored. You're mentally obese, overfed on information, starving for wisdom. Every scroll, every clip, every new opinion you encounter adds another layer to the clutter inside your head. And like a body filled with sugar but lacking nutrients, your mind becomes restless, unbalanced, and confused. We are surrounded by noise that pretends to be meaning. It's a paradox of the modern mind. The more we consume, the less we feel, the more we know, the less we understand. Carl Jung once said that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. Noise has become the modern method of avoidance. It's the collective addiction that keeps us from hearing what's within. Every time we turn up the volume of the world, we silence the voice inside us. Jung called this avoidance the shadow, the parts of ourselves we repress or ignore because they make us uncomfortable. And in the age of overstimulation, that shadow has grown enormous. Instead of turning inward, we turn on another video. Instead of reflecting, we refresh. We think we're staying informed, but what we're really doing is staying distracted. Information has become a drug, easy to access, endlessly supplied, and engineered to keep us hungry. Each ping, each notification, is a hit of dopamine, a promise of relevance. But dopamine doesn't feed the soul. It only feeds the craving. The more we consume, the emptier we feel. Like Nietzsche warned, he who fights with monsters should see to it that he himself does not become a monster. In our case, the monster is the endless feed, and every moment we engage without awareness, it consumes a little more of our attention, our most sacred resource. The tragedy is that we've mistaken consumption for consciousness. We think that because we're exposed to everything, we've experienced something. But real experience demands stillness. It requires space for meaning to take root. A mind constantly bombarded by input has no room to process truth. You can't hear your intuition if it's buried beneath 1,000 borrowed opinions. You can't cultivate wisdom when your attention is scattered across 1,000 screens. Imagine walking into a library that never ends, shelves upon shelves of words, theories, and ideas. You wander endlessly, grabbing book after book, never finishing one. That's what the modern mind looks like, full of knowledge but devoid of synthesis. We've lost the ability to sit with an idea until it transforms us. We touch everything but grasp nothing. Nietzsche spoke of the abyss, the terrifying emptiness one encounters when the illusions of the world fall away. The modern person doesn't face the abyss directly anymore. They drown it in noise. Every distraction is a shield against that encounter. Because to face silence is to face the truth that much of what we chase is hollow. It's to confront the uncomfortable question, who am I when I'm not consuming? The psychological cost of this avoidance is immense. Anxiety has become the default state of our age, not because the world is more dangerous, but because our minds are overloaded. The nervous system, constantly stimulated, never learns how to rest. It's trapped in perpetual alertness, scanning, reacting, refreshing. The brain interprets this flood of input as chaos. No wonder we feel disoriented, exhausted, disconnected. Our minds were never designed to handle infinite noise. They were designed to listen, to observe, to reflect. Jung believed that individuation, becoming whole, requires confronting the unconscious self. But in a world where silence is rare, that confrontation never happens. The modern human doesn't individuate, they imitate. They absorb fragments of others' ideas, emotions, and identities until they lose their own. You start to speak in borrowed language, to think in memes, to feel what you're told to feel. And slowly, the authentic self begins to disappear under layers of noise. We have more content than ever, but less contemplation. More information, but less understanding. More connection, but less intimacy. The noise has become our comfort zone, a place where we can hide from the weight of being alive. Because to sit in silence is to meet yourself without filters, without distractions, without escape routes. And most people have never met that version of themselves. Alan Watts once said, "Muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone." But we never let our minds settle. We stir them constantly, chasing clarity while creating more confusion. In the endless chase for stimulation, we've forgotten how to digest life slowly. Every new piece of noise we consume is like another spoonful of sugar, momentarily sweet, ultimately empty. We feed our curiosity, but starve our depth. You can see it in the way people speak now, short, fragmented, reactive. The cadence of thought has changed. We no longer pause to think, we respond. We don't ponder, we perform. The external world has hijacked the rhythm of our minds, and in doing so, it's robbed us of something sacred, the silence between thoughts. That silence is where meaning lives. It's the gap in which understanding breathes. But we've filled that gap with static. So we confuse silence for boredom, reflection for loneliness, stillness for stagnation. But in truth, those states are doorways. When you silence the noise, what emerges is not emptiness, it's awareness. Beneath the overstimulation lies a forgotten terrain, the inner world. It's vast, uncharted, and waiting. But to reach it, you must first detox from noise. You must sit in the discomfort long enough for it to become peace. Modern life has made this almost radical, to choose silence over sound, presence over distraction, depth over speed. But that is where the transformation begins. You begin to see that what you once called boredom was never boredom at all. It was the hunger for stillness, the mind's desperate attempt to be heard beneath the noise. And if you were to strip away all of it, the opinions, the endless scrolling, the background sound of 1,000 voices, what would remain? Who would you be in the absence of input? Most people have never asked that question, because the answer requires them to stop listening to the world and start listening to themselves. The truth is unsettling yet liberating. You are not bored. You are overstimulated. You are not uninspired. You are overfed. Your mind is not starving, it's suffocating. And until you learn to step away from the banquet of noise, you will never taste the silence that can truly nourish you. Because somewhere beneath all this chaos, your soul is whispering. It's asking you to listen, not to the world, not to another voice, but to the quiet pulse of your own being. Only there, in that fragile stillness, does real wisdom begin. There comes a point when the noise becomes unbearable, when even the things that once distracted you start to feel hollow. The videos, the songs, the endless feed of opinions, they no longer soothe you, they only remind you how lost you've become. You begin to sense it, faintly, beneath the static, a hunger that no amount of stimulation can satisfy. It's not hunger for more content, but hunger for silence. The kind of silence that doesn't just quiet the world around you, but quiets the chaos within. At first, silence feels terrifying. It feels like deprivation, like losing something essential. You reach for your phone out of habit, searching for another sound, another face, another fragment of noise to remind you that you exist. But then you stop, even for a moment, and something strange begins to happen. The first thing you notice is discomfort. It feels like withdrawal. Your mind protests, your fingers twitch. The silence presses against you, thick and heavy, demanding attention. It feels unnatural, even painful. But slowly, if you endure it, the discomfort begins to dissolve, and beneath it, you find something you haven't felt in a long time: awareness. This is the point where transformation begins. Silence, once feared, reveals itself as nourishment. What felt like emptiness begins to feel like space, the kind of space where thoughts can breathe, where feelings can unfold without judgment. You realize that silence is not the absence of life, it's the presence of depth. It's where clarity hides, waiting to be rediscovered. Alan Watts once said that, "The meaning of life is just to be alive." But how can we truly be alive when we're constantly reacting to the next thing? When every quiet moment is filled before it can even begin? The irony is that we chase stimulation to feel alive, but it's only in stillness that aliveness is fully felt. The sound of your breath, the pulse in your fingertips, the faint hum of existence itself. That's life, not filtered through screens, not dramatized by content, but raw, immediate, real. As you sit with silence longer, you begin to see it differently. It's no longer a void to be filled, but a mirror reflecting everything you've buried beneath the noise. The grief you ignored, the dreams you postponed, the questions you never dared to ask, they rise up, gently, asking to be acknowledged. And though it's painful, it's also freeing. Because what silence does is strip away the illusions. It removes the filters and forces you to meet yourself exactly as you are, without noise, without performance, without distraction. In this stillness, something ancient stirs. The self that existed before the noise, the one that used to sit quietly under trees, that used to listen to the wind, that used to wonder instead of scroll, begins to awaken. You start to remember what it feels like to just be. And with that remembrance comes peace. Not the shallow peace of temporary relief, but a deep, resonant calm that seeps into your bones. It's as if the world slows down, and for the first time, you're not chasing it. You're watching it. You're part of it. Psychologically, this shift is profound. Neuroscientists call it regulation, the nervous system returning to balance after years of overstimulation. When you let silence in, your mind stops racing to predict, to react, to perform. The constant flow of dopamine slows, and your brain begins to reset its rhythm. The noise withdrawal fades, replaced by a grounded stillness. The more time you spend in silence, the more your mind begins to heal, not by effort, but by presence. Carl Jung once wrote that, "Who looks outside, dreams, who looks inside, awakes." Silence is the doorway to that awakening. It's not meditation as a trend, not spirituality as performance, but the raw, unadorned act of listening, deeply and fully. You begin to hear things you never noticed before: the rhythm of your own breath, the texture of your thoughts, the spaces between them. Each sound, each pause, feels sacred. It's in those pauses that you rediscover your humanity. You realize that peace was never something to be found out there, it was something you had to uncover within. Silence becomes the sanctuary where your thoughts soften, your emotions untangle, and your soul exhales. It's not about erasing the noise forever, that's impossible in this world. It's about learning to carry a pocket of stillness within you, no matter how loud life gets. There's a kind of magic that happens when you truly listen, not to content, not to people, but to existence itself. You begin to notice the subtle symphony of life, the whisper of wind through leaves, the hum of distant traffic, the faint echo of your heartbeat. You realize that the world has never been silent. You've just been too loud to hear it. Silence reveals patterns. It shows you what matters and what doesn't. The thoughts that once screamed for attention begin to quiet, and in their place rises a deeper knowing. You begin to see that peace isn't a feeling that comes and goes. It's the foundation beneath all feelings. It's always been there, buried under the noise of your own avoidance. As silence deepens, you start to reconnect, not just with yourself, but with life itself. The moments you once rushed through begin to glow with meaning. Washing dishes, walking outside, even sitting alone becomes sacred acts of presence. You start to realize that life isn't something to escape from or fill with distractions. It's something to participate in, consciously, quietly, fully. And in that awareness, beauty returns. You notice the softness of sunlight, the honesty of laughter, the quiet grace of being alive. You no longer need the noise to feel alive, because you've found something greater, stillness that breathes, a silence that listens back. You come to see that silence was never your enemy, it was your forgotten teacher. Every moment of stillness becomes a lesson, in patience, in acceptance, in truth. You begin to crave it, not because it's comfortable, but because it's real. The world, with all its chaos and chatter, starts to lose its power over you. The noise may still surround you, but it no longer owns you. Eventually, you reach a point where you can walk through the world with quiet inside you. You can be amidst the noise and remain untouched. The mind no longer reacts to every stimulus, it chooses what to let in. And that is freedom, not the absence of sound, but the mastery of attention. Because when the noise fades, life becomes audible again. You start hearing the subtle music of existence, the sound of rain on glass, the silence between heartbeats, the breath before a word. You realize that the world was never silent. You were just too busy listening to everything except what mattered. And in that realization, something inside you shifts. You no longer crave the endless noise. You begin to trust the silence, to rest in it, to draw strength from it. You start to see that silence is not empty, it's full of presence, full of truth, full of life. The hunger for silence is not about rejecting the world. It's about returning to it, with clarity, with peace, with awareness. It's about learning to live with the volume turned down, so you can finally hear what's real. And when you do, you understand, you were never truly bored, never truly empty. You were simply lost beneath the weight of noise. Now you're beginning to remember. You're learning how to listen again, not to the chaos, but to the quiet pulse of being. The same silence that's always been there, waiting patiently beneath the static, whispering, "Welcome home." The noise never truly disappears. The world will always hum, screens will glow, voices will rise, the rhythm of modern life will keep pulsing. But something inside you has changed. You no longer need to escape into the noise to feel alive. You've tasted silence, and it has redefined what fulfillment means. The same world that once overwhelmed you now feels softer, almost sacred, because you've learned the rarest skill of all, how to listen without getting lost. This is where integration begins. The goal isn't to abandon the world, to retreat into mountains or monasteries. It's to carry stillness within you, to move through the chaos without letting it possess your peace. Silence becomes your compass, a quiet truth you return to when the world grows loud again. You realize that noise itself isn't the enemy, unconscious consumption is. It's not the sound of life that drains you, but the constant need to fill every empty space. Once you stop trying to escape silence, you stop needing to escape yourself. Viktor Frankl once wrote that between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space lies our freedom. That space is silence. The modern world tries to erase it, but you can reclaim it. When someone speaks harshly, silence gives you clarity before you react. When you feel overwhelmed, silence gives you distance before you spiral. It's not passivity, it's power. It's awareness holding its ground amid the noise. You begin to live differently. You start saying no to the things that clutter your mind. You stop chasing the next distraction, the next update, the next rush. You notice that conversations deepen, time slows, and small moments feel vast again. You rediscover the pleasure of doing one thing at a time, eating slowly, walking without headphones, watching the sunset without recording it. Life becomes less about consuming and more about being. The irony is beautiful. Once you stop running from silence, the noise loses its grip. You can enter the same chaotic spaces and still feel untouched because your focus no longer lives out there. It rests quietly inside you, steady, grounded. The world still moves, but you don't have to move with it. You can watch. You can breathe. You can choose. And in that choice, meaning returns. You realize that the cure for modern emptiness isn't more stimulation, but more presence. The quiet you once feared becomes your sanctuary, a space where your soul finally speaks and you actually listen. Silence was never the absence of life. It was life waiting to be heard. You're not bored. You're not empty. You're simply overfed on noise. And now you know the antidote, not to consume less but to listen more. To slow down. To let silence finish the sentence. Because when the noise fades, what remains is everything you were searching for all along. Peace, meaning, and the soft hum of being alive.